What you present and what you coach and the knowledge that you give needs to be correct. And terminology and, absolute statements, you've got to be careful with what you do, especially when you're reaching that many people. A deep squat will activate the VMO to a greater extent than any other, 20 or 90 degree squat. But it doesn't. And they're fantastic marketers. We can learn from them. You know what I mean? How do we apply that? What's the art of the program inside? How do we apply the program over a long structured period of time, whether that's 3 months or 3 years or fucking 10 years?
Just quickly before we get into the full show, for any of you who's watched this podcast before, you will know that I am super passionate about this podcast and getting on the most interesting guests to help you get better results with your fat loss, your business, your life, and your coaching skills. But at the moment, 85% of you who watch this channel aren't subscribed to the channel. The bigger the channel gets, the better the guests get, the more high production value the show gets, as well as the clips get. So if you're watching this, please, can you click subscribe, like, comment, improve interaction so YouTube know we are a channel to be reckoned with. And then we can take over, and then I'm coming for you, Joe Rogan. So over the last number of weeks now, we've discussed strength, we've discussed hypertrophy, we've discussed fat loss, we've discussed mechanics, we've discussed loads of training things. And one name seems to keep coming up from you quite a lot, and that is the knees over toes guy. And I get the opinion
knees over toes.
I got a feeling you don't dislike him, but you dislike the way it's interpreted. Tell me your issues that you have with the knees over toes method, or the people that are actually trying to do it.
Now, please don't think I'm being a little bitch here. Listen, I'm sure
we said we'd ruffle feathers. We said we'd ruffle feathers this week.
The thing is, the guy's a good guy, and the intentions are incredible, and the amount of people that are helped is incredible. As coaches, there's we have the rule book though, innit? And what you present and what you coach and the knowledge that you give needs to be correct. And terminology and absolute statements, you've got to be careful with what you do, especially when you're reaching that many people. I mean, they're marketing geniuses. They're fantastic at marketing. The video quality, the way they sell the product is fantastic. And I learn a lot from it. So, I'm not saying anything about them guys, but, the stuff I don't like, are the absolute terms, like doing the split squats will fix your knee pain. Well, we know knee pain is a very complex thing, isn't it? You know what I mean? So, is it the exercise or is it the structured progressive overload and the programming and the management of recovery, or is it the exercise? Yeah.
It was a great post from Jordan Shallow a little while ago saying we can look to fix dysfunction, but we unlearn pain. And I've had a lot of guys on the podcast, talking about pain recently. And obviously, we've spoken about you about exercise mechanics and mobility and movement. And I've had Gurinder on talking about back pain specifically. I've had Andrew from Joint Dynamics on talking about pain as a specific topic. And the thing that sort of comes up time and time again is that pain is very much subjective and pain is not understood. It's a really complex thing. Yeah. And Gurinder mentioned it, that he was saying sometimes he's helped people's back pain by just having a conversation with them. And just someone listening to them and just brings that nervous system down, and then the pain sort of goes away. Or you put a lacrosse ball in someone's pec, right? And that's the common one, and we'll move on to someone that talks about that a lot in a second. But you put a lacrosse ball in someone's pec and it breaks up the fascia. No, it doesn't. How much force you need to break up fascia is unbelievable. But the placebo effect of I pushed this into my pec and now I feel better. Sometimes the pain never comes back because it's subjective and it's up here. So I think it's very hard to make absolutes of pain. But the question would, using that example of the split squats will improve your knee pain, from a structural standpoint, if we look at the things that could potentially cause to increase struggles with tissue tolerance, increase postural problems that could cause issues with extra compressive forces, is the split squat a big exercise in your repertoire for someone that may be having, let's say, dysfunction around the knee? Let's not say pain.
Yeah, and this is where our styles do, relate to each other. I use the split squat a lot. I don't use that variation that he promotes, but I have used it, and it's a fantastic exercise, letting the heel come up or elevating that front heel to get more range. Like, how I don't do it is how he does it, with this massive lower back arch. All
this
right?
is my problem with it as well. Just like, sorry to cut you off there, but this is my problem with it as well, right?
Yeah.
If for someone that's supposed to know their anatomy, right, will know that you have 10 to 15 degrees of hip extension max. So if you now have maxed out what you have, your maximum potential hip extension, we're not talking people that are dysfunctional, we're talking the maximum potential hip extension like you can get. If you've maxed out that movement now has to come from somewhere else. So now that's going to come from the spine, which is going to limit your ability to brace. And so while I like the idea of getting as much range of motion over the toe as possible and getting your hamstring as close to your calf as possible, I don't understand the need for the massive extension of the hip past where people's ranges are.
This is the problem. You see, these people aren't aware of that as, general pop. They don't understand that. They don't see it. All they see is this product of this guy looking incredible and the backstory that he had knee pain, now he doesn't because of one of these exercises such as this. And that's the problem I have with the coaches. Like, a lot of the exercises are fantastic, but how they're executed is very, very poorly. Like we say, massive lumbar extension, lower back arch. That's going to fuck you up. You're putting so much compression on those lumbar discs. You're creating a terrible, posture for your hips. Like, you're creating this pelvic tilt that is just not healthy. You're probably jamming up that hip joint and acetabulum. You might fix your knee pain, but you're gonna create a back pain.
Exactly.
And to load that further, you're gonna run into more problems. So that's one of the problems I have. And some of the stuff that's said by the guys, such as strengthening the VMO, using deep squats will fix your knee pain. Well, the study that they provide to back that statement up actually doesn't even show that, but they tell people that this is the study that shows that, when actually it doesn't.
So what does it show? What does that study show?
They said that the study provides evidence to say that a deep squat will activate the VMO to a greater extent than any other 20 or 90 degree squat, but it doesn't. The 90 degree squat displayed a greater VMO activation. So they've misinterpreted the study completely, but they've used that study as their evidence. There probably is other shit out there to say that it does do that. But as coaches, we look at these things and then you don't trust it, like, is it, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. How much do you think the VMO actually plays a role in knee pain? Because I don't think very much.
Well, I mean, a lot of people do have an underdeveloped. If you look at that VMO, they do have an underdeveloped area of that VMO. You know what I mean? And if the knees are caving in a lot, then a stronger VMO does help. Weak knees, a stronger VMO does help. But how do we strengthen that VMO? Physios will always tell you to do terminal knee extensions, leg extensions, and shit like that, which are great exercises. It's not just about Poliquin step downs and deep squatting.
But do you think it's a little bit like putting up? I think looking at the VMO, I'm not saying it's not always the thing. I'm not saying it's not. I don't put some time into it. But do you think it's like putting a plaster on a bullet hole? In the sense of yeah,
I see what you mean. I see what you mean.
Pain, we're going to focus on the knee. We're going to work on the VMO.
And then, I definitely think it's overdone.
Instead of looking at internal, external rotation of the hip, instead of looking at the rec fem, instead of looking at these big muscles that are probably going to actually have more impact on what's going to happen in terms of movement, your knees cave in on a squat, not because your VMO is weak, but because you have instability through the hip.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. And I mean, I don't, if people have weak knees, you're not going to just test the VMO and test all those other quad muscles and say your VMO is weak, are you? It's just one of the muscle groups out of the 5, 6, 7, 10 that you're going to just work on, and how you do it will be different. Like I said, those exercises aren't the be all and end all that are promoted. Maybe it is the management of progressive overload, pain, and acute variables of tempos and rest periods and that sort of shit that is the key to overcoming knee pain.
But do you think there's something to be said, though, for a more streamlined marketing message? Because I think what we see, obviously, we haven't purchased these Overtoga guys courses. We see the Instagram, we see the highlight reel, we see the snippets. Now, you could say that you need to give people the full information before you buy, otherwise it's a bit conning. And I can see that argument, right? If you're just giving slightly off information, that potentially is a problem. But in this instant gratification world, like if you literally go, here are the facts about knee dysfunction, bang, 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 you probably wouldn't gain an audience because it probably wouldn't be interesting. People probably wouldn't remember it. People will probably be overwhelmed, so they'll achieve nothing. So if you just go, right, okay, this is sort of like the 1% that I think is going to have the biggest impact on the whole, right? The one thing. And then people can do that. And the people that don't buy his programs get a little bit better. It's not perfect, but it's a little bit better because the biggest impact. And the people that buy his program may get all the nuance behind the paywall.
Yeah, and that's
got more time.
Like I said, their philosophy is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, you can have your own philosophy and your own concepts, and they're fantastic concepts. They're not his. He's taken a bit of Poliquin and other top coaches that we have worked with personally, and made it his own. And then he did get a bit of shit about not crediting certain coaches, which I think he does now. He's not a bad guy. He's a good guy, and he has good intentions. And they're fantastic marketers. We can learn from them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And as I do learn from them. But the issue I have as a coach who is, academically educated, spends a lot of money on upskilling and workshops, so I can get better and help people the right way. You can't do things like use evidence, but you're providing nonsense. It's essentially pseudoscience, and that's where it's incorrect, and you can't be doing that. If you don't understand all that shit, then don't say that sort of stuff. And the same goes on the mechanic side. People use terminology to confuse normal people, general people, other coaches. They use these technical terms, biomechanics, and all this crazy wacky shit, external moment arms, and all this stuff. And
there's way too much of that shit in general. I think there's so many people trying to sound, not even charlatans, but people trying to sound smart, maybe to mask a inadequacy, or maybe trying to just make them seem like they're bigger than they actually are. But it's not even like, from a social media perspective, there's people talking to people that aren't their clients, right? Like I now talk to coaches primarily on my social media, and I still don't use those words. But I see it. I see people like squeeze your glutes, squeeze your lats on one-to-one PT sessions. I'm like, the client doesn't know that. Squeeze your teres major. What the fuck does that even mean? Like, speak in language that the people that you're trying to speak to understand, rather than trying to impress other coaches, because it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
I don't have to speak in those terms now.
You're like, squeeze your fucking ass. I had a client once. I said to my client, I want you to squeeze your bum. They took their hand and squeezed their ass. So that's probably too dumbed down, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, like, I used literally terms, fuck the bar, nips to hips. Like stuff that makes sense to the people I have in front of me.
Yeah, to the nows. Fuck the bar.
Yeah, and this is what people like Ben Patrick do really well, right? Because he's taken concepts from Poliquin. And this is where we had this conversation about strength ratios, right? That how I think there's too much nuance in this to actually be genuinely useful. That being said, he is using it perfectly, because it's like, you've got somebody who has issues, you should be able to split squat 50% of your body weight. Ooh, that's a target. I can shoot for that. Yeah. If people work towards that, 90% of them are going to get better. If you get stronger the end ranges of hip extension and hip flexion, you're going to probably feel less pain. Again, pain's subjective, but So I think he's onto something. Do I think it's perfect? But do I think any model's perfect? I just don't think his model is flexible. Like, it's very Poliquin, and I can't imagine anything coming in that would drastically change his approach. Like, I'm not saying he's narrow-minded, but it's very tunneled.
Like I said, I think he's a good guy, and I just see those flaws there. But that's because I'm being critical and I'm a coach. You know what I mean? And And essentially, as well, you're not
you're not complaining necessarily about him. Like some of his exercise selection is not great, but it's not so much him. It's the person 3-4 levels down from him that will ATG certified coaches that now he's slightly off in his split squat. They're 20 levels further.
It's shocking. I see it all the time, and like some of the coaches that are getting coached under their banner, their ATG, Athletic Truth Group, these ATG coaches. Oh my goodness, they haven't trained. You can tell they haven't fucking trained. They have not got a clue, but they're using a lot of technical terms and technical exercises and, making these absolute terms probably worse than knees over toes Ben Patrick does. They're really going for it, and exercises are shocking. They're trying to do Peterson step downs and they look fucking shocking. It's not even a Peterson step down, and it just doesn't justify the exercise or, the standard of what you have to be at to do those exercises. There's just a bit too dumbed down. And it's people, it's people running before they walk as well, right? Like, almost,
I don't remember the last time I used a Peterson step up or a Pollock step up. Now, I'm not saying they are bad exercises, and I know you use them to great effect, right? But you've done this for many years, and you understand them; they have their place. But the amount of people here? If I had a client coming in who says, "Oh, well, I've got 12 weeks, I want to get really, really lean, and I want to move a little bit better," and the first exercise I had him doing was Peterson step-ups, to be asking for refunds. I'm going to do a 3-inch range of motion. Like, get on a leg press. Like, do something that's actually going to make you do a little bit of work. I think people get lost in being physios and trying to be clever, rather than going, do you know what? The basics work. Look, you got somebody here is weak as fuck. If you have a hack squat, you have a leg curl, you have a chest press, you have a pull down in a row and a shoulder press, you can do 90% of your work.
Yeah.
Safely. And let's put compound lifts out of the equation for a second because they are complex. But, I think people overcomplicate it and try and just get the little 2%. I've been guilty of that. I've been guilty of that tons. With regards to these coaches though, do you think there's the problem here? Is a lot of courses will teach exercises, so teach execution of exercises and mechanics course things like this. But now as the world moves online, is the problem that very few personal trainers have ever had a personal trainer themselves to know what it feels like? Because I've learned so much from getting coached hands-on by people. But for years I was personal trainer without having a personal training session.
Yeah, and training with people, like your peers, your work colleagues, and your friends and coaches, you know what I mean? That's where you learn, innit, in the trenches, and I get to apply these methods and strategies and exercises and learn exercise execution, and having to dig deep and when to back off, I think the online space, the online world is so guilty of it, you get newbie qualified coaches, trainers, nutritionists, then going out and trying to sell a product. They very much, mostly all the time, undersell it at a really shit cost. That's because, they ain't providing any value, everyone knows nutritionally, most of the time we need to create calorie deficits, build good habits, build good behaviors, eat more protein most of the time, get that fiber, fruit and veggies, plenty of water. Fat loss should be occurring. So we understand the principles, but like you've mentioned many times before, how do we apply that? What's the art of the program inside? How do we apply the program over a long structured period of time, whether that's 3 months or 3 years or fucking 10 years? And that's the beauty of the art of coaching, the art of putting something together and then being a good coach and having experience. And that's why people pay a premium rate for people like me and you, because that's what we can do. And that's experience, isn't it?
I also think there's a difference between having on paper understanding a diet or a training program and then being able to apply it to yourself and then be able to apply it to somebody else. There is a difference between I can go in and write a perfect program, do it and go, oh my God, that's actually not a good idea by doing it myself. But on paper, it makes perfect sense. In the same way that I will coach myself through a split squat and go, oh, that felt pretty good. And then I take a client through it. It's a different experience. It's a different skill set. And if you've never had someone coach you properly, if you think, oh yeah, but I've been training for 10 years, and you might have done, but it's a totally different experience when you get someone looking over your shoulder. I've had Ant from Shapeshifters coach me. I've had Tom Kernington from Body Development coach me. I've had people like Eddie Baruta, Nick Daniel, Justin McGuire coach me. And I've learned so much, more than any course, from getting hands-on with these guys. Ant and Tom Kernington, I did an arm session, which is more cardiovascular demanding than doing intervals. And just that level of detail make me a better coach, both in person and online.
Yeah, totally.
So moving into courses though, like in terms of your education, in terms of if you got to, trainers have got to the stage and you want to upskill, obviously we started in the days, so this is going to sound old, aren't we? We started in the days where there wasn't, every coach wasn't selling an online course, right? So what was the first proper print book that you ever bought?
I think the first book I purchased was, I don't remember the exact name of it, but I think it was just like a personal training manual, or maybe, I think it was just like a personal training manual, you know, that I purchased, or maybe someone gave to me, like, and it was just a whole go on like personal training, like, and that was it, like programming, exercise, safety, rest and work ratios, and all that sort of palaver, really. But the first, what I do remember, one of the first books that I actually remember and still use to this day is probably I got two. The Charles Poliquin German Body Composition book.
I have that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. Learned so much from that. And you get workouts that you can try and all that sort of shit, nutrition advice and all that. Give or take what you want from it, you know. And then the other book is a bit more of a sciencey, in-depth book that I always pull out. It's Super Training by Mel Siff, and that's really like
a classic.
That's just really like over the top. I've had it for like 10 years plus, and I remember first getting it and certainly not understanding it, but now I understand it all and I can reference it and use it to actually understand things and concepts better. So they're two really good books. Like one that you can use as a beginner, the Charles Poliquin German Body Composition book, and then one that you can use for the next fucking 15, 30 years as a trainer and a coach. Whether you're a personal trainer, physio, or a strength and conditioning coach, you can use that like bodybuilding coach or sport high performance coach. You can use Super Training to go to as the Bible.
I remember... Do you remember Luke Haslett, or Hazlett as he's actually called, for a period of time? So obviously he was the first person to ever really do online personal training, and I went to university with Luke. And to tell you what, level of commitment from that guy was unbelievable. Like he looked incredible year round. And I tell you what, I've played rugby for 15 odd years of my life, more than that, and he's one of the scariest people I've ever had run towards me. He's in a game of touch, you know. But he was a big super training guy. Like I remember looking at early programs of his, and I was like, "Yeah, you've studied super training." But you got results, and it proves how good that book is. And I think
it's a great book.
For me, I'll go into the first couple of books that I bought, and then I'll transition into the two I think are the most relevant for personal trainers. I think the first kind of books I bought, there was probably a couple that I don't remember. Like a lot of my early books were like books that were associated with men's health. You know, like not, you know, when you did the books that were attached to them, like the supplement guide and the training guide and the 8-week body plan. And then I had Ignite the Fire by John Goodman, which is still a really good book.
Was that good? Because I've never read that, and I actually want to read it.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the most basic, simple way of looking at marketing ever. It's not going to be game changing. It's not going to be anything you don't know now already. But what the great thing, something stuck to me, and this is the premise the whole book is written around, is the premise of marketing is do a really good job and then make sure everybody in the world knows about it.
Okay, yeah, I heard that lots.
And that's a John Goodman thing. And John's great. And then the other, but when I first started at UP, I bought two books, both of which I think are very good, both of which I don't use as much as I probably did at the time. The first one was a big old book called Becoming a Supple Leopard by Kelly Starrett.
Great. It's a fantastic book. Game-changing book for the industry.
It's nearly everybody's first book on their mantelpiece, right? Like, and most people have it as the physical book. I actually had the ebook, but most of my peers had the physical book. It's monstrous.
It was a big book, man.
And I tell you what, I think in some ways it was ahead of its time, and in some ways it's dated badly.
Great book.
Like he talks a little bit, like, you know how we talked about the two types of mechanics the other week. We talked about the muscle mechanics crowd and the postural mechanics crowd. He was the early stage of postural mechanics crowd. He talked about center of mass and torque and like creating tension. That sort of stuff was great. Stacking the rib cage, all stuff that was way ahead of its time that no one even thought about when it came to training.
Yeah, totally.
But I think he was where it's been massively outdated by the emergence of what we call the muscle mechanics crowd, is that it was still very much in the rule of thumb that every single person can do an overhead squat. Every single person will squat ass to grass. Like limb lengths weren't a thing. You know, like everybody can squat. Like because I think he even used the baby analogy. Now, I hate the squatted like a baby analogy because when you get a head that's 3 times the size of your body, then we'll talk about why you can squat perfectly.
Yeah, you get a counterbalance, and that's also something that the knees over toes crowd use as well. You know, like you should be able to squat. Look at the babies. Well, like you say, a baby has a huge fucking head to body ratio, and they get a huge counterbalance.
So people don't understand what Steve's meaning by counterbalance, but the simplest way to look at this, right, is that like your center of mass will go straight through your head, down through the middle of your feet, right? So the more you move away from your center of mass, the more likely you are going to fall over one way or the other, right? So if you've got a small head, big long body, big long legs, to get into a squat, you're moving really far away from that range. And this is why people with long femurs tend to struggle with squatting. Now, if you are a baby with a big old head, you never move your hips back further than the back of your head. So you're always straight over your center of mass. It's so easy. And the bones aren't fully formed.
Yeah,
so, like,
true.
Of course they are. But, like, there's still some stuff there that I occasionally go back and use and go, right, with my knowledge that I have now, which of these are useful for the issue that I have or my client's having? Or what of these are a bit useless now, knowing what I know and knowing that, like, okay, that's a breathwork issue. That's a structural issue. That's a proportions issue. But I now can look at that book with 10 years of hindsight and go, there are still some really good stuff in this.
There is. I mean, the book, like I said, like Kelly Starrett is fantastic and it was a game changer. You know what I mean? And the book is fantastic and all of his information is brilliant. The only issue I have with it is, again, it's just terminology and the use of certain words that, you know, for normal people and average coaches, whatever in it, it's good. But, you know, like, the terminology is probably a bit incorrect, like the use of torque in the hips and shit like that. You know, I don't like that.
But I think there's lots of good things still in that book. I mean, what was the most brutal stretch you tried from that book? What really hurt?
Well, I mean, not the stretch, but a lot of the lacrosse ball stuff is on it. You know what I mean? Like sitting on that shit, man, or getting it up into the side of the hip, man. That's fucking horrible. Like, but like, you get like the good thing about Kelly Starrett's work, whether it's, you know, the fucking voodoo flossing or the trigger point ball stuff or the band distraction work, or the simple stretching stuff, like it all creates a short window of change to then go and train. That's what it's good for, like allowing you to train really well. Like, but for long-term purposes, I don't know, like I've used a lot of the stuff and it helps short-term, but whether or not it helps long-term, yeah, it probably does. But
well, that's what we said. We said plenty of times, right? Like the reason why people feel tight is that their nervous system doesn't feel comfortable in a certain range, right? So all of this stuff will be temporary unless you go and reinforce that. I've now opened, my nervous system's calmed down. I've got some blood flow to my hip. I can get into that hip extension. I now go and do some of the split squats. And I go, oh, look, I can get more range. The brain goes, oh, not as scary as I thought being here. And over time, it's like, it's stronger in those end positions. You've just now got to open up those end positions to get there in the first place. And I still use his hip reset. If anyone comes in with back pain, I do, this is what I do. If someone comes in with lower back pain, I will do the hip reset with Kelly Starrett to fire up the hamstrings and the hip flexors. I will do a form of dead bug probably to kind of open things up and some breathing work. If I do those things, a bear breathing drill, some glute work and that hip reset, a lot of times back pain will go away. If it doesn't, then I'll have an A series, which is more like split squats to open up the rec fem into like an incline hyper, and then I'll go into their main work. And it tell you what, it rarely ever fails. And rarely do I have someone that has back pain, which I can't get rid of, at least temporarily, for the session to go ahead.
Yeah, love it. Seeing as that we spoke about knees over toes, well, I'll quickly, I know we've got not much time left, but like quickly go over about like the issue with, discussing torque in some of his work. Like, for example, like when someone does a squat, and if they rotate their feet and create more torque in their hips, they will improve their squat. Now, that does work. However, using torque to say torque is the reason why your motor control pattern improves, I think it's the wrong way to use what torque actually is. Because torque is happening, like you can do a normal squat and there's torque. It's three-dimensional torque. Torque happens on any joint, right? Torque is constantly there to stop you falling over. Now, if you screw your feet into the floor, are you creating more torque? Yeah, you are creating more torque, but maybe the terminology and the simplified way to explain it would, you're just activating more of the muscles around the hips, and it's going to help you improve your control and your skill of the squat, as opposed to pushing, like create torque,
Yeah, I agree with that. And I wonder, like, but it's still, I think it's still a useful cue. Like, I did
it's a fantastic cue. I just think that to the reason why it's you know what I mean. Like, yeah.
One of the things I dealt with is like I did the barbell course from Prescripts from Jordan Shallow, and he took that a stage further, which was really interesting. Is in like at the top of the squat. I'm going to use torque for use of a better word, right? But you don't need much rooting, let's say, or torque through the floor at the top of the squat because there's no load there. As you get to the bottom position, you need to be able to jam that femur into the acetabulum. You need to create stability through the musculature of the hip. You need to be strong and stable, really stable in the bottom of the squat because that's where it's the most challenge. So rather than just going, I'm going to screw the feet in, I screw the feet in a little bit and I increase that level of torque or rotation as we get into the hole to create more stability. In the same way as a bench press, have a little bit of drive down through the feet at the top, but I'm increasing as I get to the bottom. So I just create this real sturdy structure to bang out the hole. And I tell you what, that thought process was a game changer in taking what Kelly Starrett started and making it practical.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And that's what I mean. Like, I don't think torque should be the word that you use to describe a motor control strategy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Moving on to like I was saying about the best two books I read, and we'll finish off with some cool stuff.
Sorry, of course.
The best two, I know I can go over a little bit. Best two books I read that are real practical, and I'm really proud to say these because I've had the author of these two books on the podcast.
Yeah,
which is fantastic. The first one is a book called The Dark Side of Fat Loss by Sean Croxton, a guy I've had on the show twice. One talking about how the brain affects your health, and the second time talking about money, which is his main thing now. But this book was about hormones and understanding the connection. And I tell you what, it's a bit too paleo at times. It's a bit anti-calories in versus calories out and more hormones. But what it really did show, in my mind, is like how the body is interconnected, how the brain works with sleep, how leptin and ghrelin work. And he's so good at breaking down complex topics into simple things, whether you're a beginner trainer or you're an advanced trainer that maybe overworked and tired that just wants a recap of the stuff without having to delve into a super training level or James Lavelle level of cracking a metabolic code book. Like having that was really, really good. I still use it to this day. And I what it shows me is that calories in, calories out is still the biggest thing. What coaches don't understand is how many things affect calories out. Yeah. And this book shows you it. Phenomenal, well worth getting. And the second is a book called, it used to be called, actually, my mind's gone blank what it used to be called. The Last Shred. But it's now called The Diet Adjustments Manual by Andy Morgan, who I had on the show a little while ago. And that is like literally a game-changing book of how to adjust diets, like a practical guide of, if you see this, do this. This is how you look at data. This is how you assess data. This is how you make adjustments. And with tons of case studies, hands down the two best books I have ever had as a personal trainer.
Yeah, they're good books. I should go over them because I haven't read those for years. The V-Shred. Damn. I've got so many books online as well.
The V-Shred. Yeah. I don't slander Andy Morgan by comparing him to V-Shred. That dude, we can have an episode of what I think of that dude. Jesus Christ. I get bombarded at the moment. I know I'm going to stay on topic before we talk about courses with maybe we'll do an episode on fitness charlatans. But I'm getting bombarded with this guy at the moment talking about Epoch, going, "Hey, do you know you can burn calories even when you're not training?" I was like, "Dude, it's like 6% more. Like, stop it, You're full of shit."
I think it's like fuck all, man. Like 4.
It's nothing. It's less than a biscuit. Less than a biscuit.
Yeah,
So
less than a biscuit.
when it comes to courses, like you've done a lot. Like, is your masters the biggest, most valuable bit of education that you've done in terms of not books, not like in-person stuff, but like education? And if so, why? And also, what was your most applicable course that you've done?
My master's was the best one I did, and like I've done a lot of workshops and upskilling up to that point. Like lots of practical stuff. I've done a lot of Poliquin courses. I've done the Douglas Hill muscle activation stuff. I've done a ton of weightlifting, programming, all different stuff. Yeah. But my master's was a big shift for me because I went to school and I left with like 1 or 2 GCSEs. Yeah. Everything else I've done shit. So, and I was a lazy youth. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't go to university because I was lazy. I went to college, football academy. I didn't go to any exams. I failed everything. So I thought, fuck it, let me go work in the gym, innit? Yeah. But academically, I wasn't mature and I wasn't good. You know what I mean? I just wasn't good. And it took me, 10 years to get onto a master's. Not that I tried every year, obviously, I tried for a few years. But by that point, I was more mature and I had enough experience behind me to get onto a master's, because that's one of the pathways you can do, non-degree entrant. So anyway, my master's taught me how to be a critical thinker, a research practitioner, like an evidence-based practitioner. And it taught me, some of the units I did was physiology, I did biomechanics, I did programming and periodization. I learned about research and how to conduct research and how to interpret research. I did, a couple of other things as well, like weightlifting and different stuff. So it taught me how to really be a good coach and be an evident one, and choose something and have evidence for why I'm choosing it.
Mm.
So it taught me a lot, man. It really leveled up my ability and my my authority game, I think.
Mm. Yeah, it taught you everything my degree should have taught me if I was actually taking it seriously. Like, unlike you, like you had the wiseness and the wherewithal to kind of go, right, I'm not in a good place to go to university. I'm not mature enough, and then decide to do it later when you had some experience behind your belt. Whereas I just went to university because that was what you did at 18. No idea what I wanted to be, and then just spent 3 years getting pissed and ended up with a third.
As most people do, innit? As most people do,
yeah.
I did my in my third year. I did a 4-year master's, but I did it in 3 years whilst working full time. Crazy. And I did my final year was my research project, and I did really, really well. And I did it on cluster training. I studied 2 different cluster training protocols. One that was well known within the literature and one that I made up. And I basically wanted to see the effects of cluster training on 1 rep max strength over an 8-week period. And then I also wanted to compare the 2 as well. And I wanted to see the effects on, like I said, 1 rep max strength. And I wanted to see the effects of power output, mean concentric velocity. So how much speed do we lose as weight goes up? And over 8 weeks, can we improve power? So I basically found that, obviously both protocols worked. We got fucking stronger because we were lifting heavy ass fucking weights for 8 weeks. And what was interesting is that one group got more powerful and the other one just tapered off a little bit more. So one of those protocols was good for a peaking strategy for an athlete, for example, or to peak for power. And the other one was just sort of like a maintenance phase of power. Both, however, improved strength.
Which one was the one that's the best peaking strategy, yours or the main one?
I don't remember, man. I don't remember. I need to read that shit.
Just say it's yours. Just take credit for the peaking strategy. Like, you made a training system better than peaking. It's definitely Steve's one. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned those list of courses. Like, I've done so many, and I don't necessarily know what's been the biggest game changer for me. Anything from Muscle Nerds has always been really, really good. Like the Muscle Nerds program design course, it really helped. Like, I don't think it was even anything that was particularly taught. It was the fact that he just went over a lot of things, like all the basics again, and reaffirmed a lot of stuff for me. And I think a lot of the stuff you learn, like the specifics, you learn on the in-person seminar that you get to do. I still haven't been able to do that because the world fell apart. So I had to kind of piece together like the little pieces in the course that were kind of left blank because I didn't get to do the practical. And so in that thought process, I was in a time in my life where I had a bit of space to think and I was a bit more relaxed than I am now. And I started coming up with my system, which in turn developed into what I'm about to launch and helping other people do the same. Cool. So that's really the most game-changing. Douglas Heel was interesting. You mentioned Douglas Heel.
Yeah, that was good.
Because it was. I found that interesting. For the people that don't know the Douglas Heel course, you're basically prodding bits, some based on absolutely sound science, some based on Chinese meridian lines, some people will call voodoo. But like I saw crazy things that happened in that seminar. And I just remember getting to it in the Sunday. I was like, I'm so interested in this. I want this course to keep going. But if one more person prods me, I might punch him in the face. Like it was so painful a lot of the time. I was like, I want it to end, but I also want it to keep going. And that was, I'll tell a story from it in a second, but this is what I found when I started using it. Did it help my clients get better range and I can then go into their training? 100%. But was it applicable? Probably not, because while most of my clients come in expecting the pain of a leg press, they don't come in for me to press on their diaphragm in a really painful manner. And it just made very unhappy clients for the sake of my practice. But I remember a guy coming in, and I would have thought it was a plant if I didn't see this myself firsthand. He had glasses on, he was blind in one eye. And Douglas started working around his serratus anterior. And every time he was getting into his blind spot, the guy sort of like shuddered. He just slowly kept working on it. And he got up and, how's that feel? And he went, well, my shoulder pain's gone, but I also start to see blurry images in this eye.
Fuck.
Day goes by, comes in the next day without his glasses on. From blind in one eye to no glasses within 24 hours because someone pressed the side of his rib cage. Yeah. And I just thought, some of those things, I think, even if I look at courses that didn't teach me anything I particularly used, some of these courses, just by what they opened up in me. When I coach people, I say I'm not an my job is not to teach you stuff. My job is to facilitate learning. So what am I going to teach you in an hour a week? Not much, right? But I can teach you a lot, but in the grand scheme of what you'll learn in your career. But if I can create that spark that makes you then follow it up with your own research, you will learn 10 times more. So some of the best courses, I remember a Virgin Active course about TRX, of all things, where a guy released my masseter, right? And I touched my toes. And seeing that, going, how does that work? How does my jaw affect my thing? And I kind of know now, and I've asked a few people about it, but like those little things and seeing that guy gain his eyesight back, I was like, made me realize it sparked that thing in me where I found the human body interesting that made me go into studying, which I might have found boring, fascinated, looking for answers. And that has actually probably helped me become a better coach way more than what was actually taught in the course. So that makes sense.
Yeah. So that Douglas Hill course I did as well. And that was basically like the first exposure I had to how crazy the body is and how like remedial work, soft tissue work, all that shit is all about like how much we can manipulate the nervous system and the stress response we can get from it and the benefits that we can get from it. And the body's crazy, man. And that's why pain is not as simple as saying do more split squats and fucking sled drag. You know what I mean? Like, it's mad. Like, I still to this day, I use the bits back here, occipitals, to help
occipitals,
to activate the glutes.
Yeah, I think that will activate everything, right? Because I was sitting there going, why is it the glutes? But it's where all the nerves come through. So every nerve potentially stimulus in the body will be stimulated by that. So whether it's the glutes, the hands, the biceps, whatever else, it all goes down the nervous system and comes out, right? So that's going to that could activate everything in the body.
Yeah. And I think Jordan Shallow says that, like, if you do soft tissue work in this area, it can help really relieve headaches as well. So I'm always getting clients to do that sort of stuff as well with it. So,
or dizziness, like I said, coming on the air. So for the people who don't, for the people who sort of don't know what I was chatting, sorry, no one knows other than you, what we're chatting about off air. I was having occasional bouts of dizziness that, like, very, very infrequent. Nothing that I'm particularly worried about. But I've started to realise that it came when I do a lot of trap work, deadlifting, heavy deadlifts and stuff. And I wonder if it's like because of my forward head posture. And that would be a very similar thing, right? If I'm more like this, I'm now going to interfere with the nerves that are going to be coming through here, which potentially could take me off balance. So, I mean, something could help with that, right? Like, the human body's fascinating. And this is why, I want to go on a cadaver course, and reasons why I like grim stuff that people don't want to do, I want to do, because I'm like, we do all this research to see if there's aliens in space and what's the bottom of our oceans, and we don't even know what's under our skin half the time.
Yeah, it's mad. It's mad.
So on that note, obviously, I've got the sevens today, so I've better don my kilt. And you're off to a music festival. So
tomorrow, I've got a music festival Saturday, an R&B festival, old school.
Mate, some of the names that are in that.
Absolutely
Incredible.
Mad old school artists, man. Mad old school stuff.
The old London coming at you. When you were saying that, you went considerably more Cockney. Right, dude. Well, that was interesting. That was interesting to go through and chat about some of the stuff that has helped us in terms of the coaches, and hopefully will help you guys too. So, if you enjoy the show, as always, subscribe on YouTube. 80% of you who watch it aren't subscribed on YouTube, so I'm plugging hard. Just click the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, man. If I find out who you are that's not subscribed, I'll walk past you in the street. I'll tell you off. And you don't want me telling you off. So share it with your friends. Get this out there. Bigger the approach, the audience of this podcast, the bigger the guests, the bigger the production value, the more clips I can edit of me and Steve that we can put out on social media. But Steve, thank you as always, man.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Thank you very much for watching the podcast. If you're like me and like to binge watch podcast episodes, click here for our most recent episode. And if you enjoy the show and want to be updated when new videos come live, click here to subscribe to the channel.